so you got away. I got
Well,
away.
I'm good.
There's no avoiding the leg.
No, I'm good.
Good evening. Good evening, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Granville Exempted Village School Board. Thank you for being here. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please take the roll.
Mr. Janice?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Cornman?
Here.
Ms. Deeds?
Here.
Mr. Wolf?
Accommodations?
Yes. All right, I apologize. My voice is hit or miss right now for some reason. But tonight we have the pleasure of recognizing some of our runners. Extracurriculars add so much to our students' experience in Granville schools, and tonight we are recognizing more excellence in athletics. The GHS girls 6400 relay team finished a close second, just 2 seconds behind at the New Balance Indoor Nationals in New York City just a few weeks ago. Unofficially, their time was 20:33, which is a new state record for Ohio. Congratulations to Rosie Lamb, Maddie Long, Kylie McFarland, junior Alyssa Christian, and sophomore Riley Zink. So understand, this is a national competition. These girls are taking it to that next level, and we know that they're not doing it without phenomenal coaching. So their coaches are here as well. I feel like every commendation that we have, for some reason, it involves cross-country, indoor track, and I'm sure outdoor track will produce a few commendations as well. So, girls, if you could come up with your coaches, that would be fantastic. So wait, what about other coaches?
Yeah.
We're just bystanders. Just bystanders, okay. Just trying to stay out of the way.
Don't avoid them. Oh, they're in tight. That's good.
Excellent, thank you, congratulations. So another consistent portion of our commendation is always our recognition of fantastic staff members. Granville has obviously a dedicated professional group of educators that work with our young children every single day. And so tonight we have the opportunity to recognize 2 of them who have completed their master teacher status again and renewed that process. Tracy Salinas and E.B. Smith have completed the master teacher program, which allows teachers to demonstrate their practice based on the Ohio standards for the teaching profession. Successful completion of the program also satisfies one of the requirements for advanced licensure, which is part of the licensure structure that became effective in January 2011. The initial licensure is a rigorous process of documentation of exemplary teaching practices and positive student results. The renewal is required every 5 years. So, EB, I know I saw you somewhere. There you are. And Tracy, come on up and let's recognize them for master teacher status. Sorry,
Okay, now we make it all you guys.
All right, congratulations. And that concludes our commendations for this evening. Okay. Where's the?
They're talking about you.
Were you here for the track, Riley? Okay, come on up. We oh, okay. I was like, wait a second. Sister, okay. I'm like, I thought we had all
Some days.
but no, that's good. Okay, thank you. Just in the future, I'm sure you'll be here. Okay? In anticipation. Yes. Okay, that brings us to our staff report, which is our safety meeting follow-up presentation from Tanya Sherburne, our Director of Operations. Yeah. And coaches, girls, usually this is the time where you can run as fast as you can. And I know you're fast, so you don't have to stay. Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
So as Tanya's getting set up, you'll recall that we talked briefly about the safety and security plans that we have to submit to the state of Ohio every single year and have those plans reapproved. And so we meet annually with a group of safety first responders, and this is kind of a summary of that meeting. And I'm sure you'll get much more information, and feel free to ask questions because Tanya's ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. So we're here to recap the school safety meeting that we had on April 4th. And just to go over the meeting agenda, of course, we did welcome and introductions, and just to give you a sense of who all was at the meeting, we had police department representatives, we had people from the Granville Township Fire Department, Licking County Sheriff's Office, we had mental health professionals, we had district level and school building administrators, school counselors, we had certificated and non-certificated staff, we had facilities employees, and we had parents, and we had people from the Granville Recreation Department. So we had a really wide range of participants. The first thing we did was review our current emergency management plans. As Jeff mentioned, we do that once a year. And so we looked at those closely, and we have some suggestions for some changes. We also took some time to brainstorm new tools or resources that the board may want to consider to implement to further ensure the safety of our students and our staff. After we brainstormed that list of activities, we went into small group discussion, and we did a SWOT analysis on each one of those topics, at least the topics we could get to within that time frame. And then we had some expert comment, and then we looked at our next steps. This is a list of all of the brainstormed topics and suggestions for additional school safety measures. We grouped these into different categories, 6 different categories for our teams. We had one group that will be looking at school resource officers. We had another group that will be looking at facility issues, to update our door access control, to look at GPS and potentially cameras for our buses, update our PA systems in our school buildings, look at door barricading devices, consider having fire extinguishers in each classroom, and then improved after-hours communications. Another group wanted to look at training, so they will be looking at citizen aid and trauma-informed care training. There was another group that would like to further research employing a mental health specialist at the school district. Technology looked at a system called BARC, which would actually monitor our network, and it scans school-owned accounts for cyberbullying, any sexual content, any threats, potentially threats of violence that would be going on or being communicated through district-owned, like their email, Schoology, things like that. We also looked at student IDs and a key fob access into the buildings, potentially license plate recognition, additional and or updated cameras, alarms for doors that are left open, so some sort of a loud noise that would indicate that a door is still left open. And then our last group would be looking at policies and procedures, looking at building or classroom volunteers going through a background or a screening process, and then also an updated visitor check-in procedure. So our next steps, of course, we divided up into research teams. I indicated that a little bit earlier. They're going to conduct some research. They're going to share their research and evidence to support the suggestion that they were interested in implementing to a steering committee at the beginning of June, and they're going to provide a cost analysis through that research. The steering committee will be made up of first responders, local experts, and district administrators, and building administrators as well. They'll look at suggestions proposed from the research teams, and then the board would consider any of those suggestions. That pretty much sums up our meeting of just looking at our plan and then possible tools or resource to implement moving forward. So does the board have any questions?
That's a great analysis. It's great that we can get our first responders as well as community members engaged. Anything surprising come out of the SWOT analysis, the strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, or is that an update of what was before, or what was?
You're smiling, Jeff. Go ahead.
I said the one consistent thing that was through every single thread of the SWOT was cost. And so the challenge is always cost, and when you're looking at what to do to ensure the safety of students, obviously cost shouldn't necessarily be the major consideration, but it is something that every single group recognized as a potential barrier.
Yes. I concur. Any other questions?
Tanya, what's the, and you may have said this, forgive me if you did, what's the sort of expectation on timing on when the research will be completed and recommendations will be made?
So the research would be between now or our meeting, which was April 4th, and then we'll get back together. The steering committee will meet with each of the teams. So at the beginning of June. So from now until the beginning of June.
We would plan on, if there were recommendations that came out of that steering committee final meeting, bringing at least an initial discussion to the June board meeting, and then if we were going to try and implement something for the beginning of the school year, we would have to act on that in July.
I know you'll do this anyway, but obviously it'll be useful to us with recommendations that are sort of ranked in terms of priority, and also to attach budget projections.
Yes.
The cost of each of those.
That is correct.
And then an estimate on the timing. Some of these things obviously may be implemented more quickly than others.
Right. Yes, we will do that.
I think we certainly are appreciative of the volunteers on that safety committee, the folks in the public safety profession, folks within the schools as well as the parents who came and other volunteers. As you said, Mr. Brown, there's nothing more important than safety, and we appreciate the time and professionalism and consideration of those folks for the work they've already done and the work they will do. And Tanya, for your leadership, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions?
Okay, thank you.
We're now at the point in our agenda where we open the podium for public comment. If you would, if you're interested in making a comment, please step to the podium and tell us your name, if you would, your address. And we try generally to limit comments to 3 to 5 minutes. If you may.
Hi, I'm Dan Katona. I live up 451 North Granger, just up the road through the snowstorm here. And I'd take just a few minutes to say hello and introduce myself formally, and say a few words about the organization I'm working with called ACES, which is the volunteer advocacy group working to pass the school levy that's on the ballot on May 8th coming up. My wife and I moved here about 5 years ago for the schools, as many folks did. It's going to be 5 years this Saturday, the day of the Great Granville Garage Sale. By the way, a terrible day to move into the district and navigate a moving truck. Wish we'd known that. We've been very happy with what we've experienced so far with our three kiddos in school so far. We were excited to have a chance to get more involved and to join this committee with other parents and volunteers from the community and work on behalf of passing the measure. I've been pleased with what I've heard from folks so far. I want to say thank you, first of all, to Jeff and to Mike and board members and others, teachers and other volunteers and folks in the community who have been very receptive to our message and been very helpful as we have questions, because we have. We have gone forward with the idea that this community wants information. This is not the kind of place that is just told to vote some certain way and votes that way without question. They want details. They want to know what's going on. They'd like to know what's being asked of them and why. They're engaged and they want to participate in the process, and that's great. They should want that. That's one of the reasons that we feel so at home here and feel so welcome. So that's been our mantra is information, 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 and communicate about it. As you may know, it's a different kind of levy measure than we've experienced in the past. It's an earned income tax levy as opposed to property tax. So there is some learning, there's some discussion that needs to go on, and we feel like that's the most important part of our role. GranvilleAces.org is the website that we've set up, and we've had lots of good conversations that have stemmed from that site. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I'd invite you to do that and see what more you can find out from what's posted there. Ask some questions, get in touch with us. There are some ways to become more involved if you'd like to. There are some chances to participate in some forums this Wednesday at the middle school at 7 p.m. and on April 26th at Brindue Fieldhouse, sponsored by the Chamber, are some larger public events if you have particular questions, but if you have small questions, we'd be happy to answer those for you and get in touch with you and have a conversation. I know folks have been in coffee chats and living rooms and over back fences and on Facebook and the rest of it. So it's just the conversation that we expected to have and thought that we should have as a community. So I'm pleased with how it's going. I'm optimistic about what will happen on the 8th. I've heard lots of good things and heard lots of good feedback from folks. I know that we are not expecting a consensus, 100% vote. That's not the way the world works. We know that not everybody will agree, and there'll be some folks who have different opinions. But we're excited to share the message. Our feeling is, and Angela and I, who moved to the town, like I said, 5 years ago, understood that the performance that this district puts on, the educators and the folks like EB and the folks who are just incredible at what they do in town, are not just gifted to us from above. They don't come through the water system. They aren't just here no matter what happens. That performance takes hard work and energy, and it costs money. And that's not everybody's favorite thing. It's no one's cup of tea, but it's important that those of us who benefit from that system support it. So we're excited to be a part of helping everyone understand how to go about doing that. We hope that the measure will be successful. We have yard signs and buttons, other things. If you'd like to help spread the word, we'd love to have your help to do that, and your volunteerism is appreciated. And look forward to talking with you before the measure, and look forward to your yes vote on May 8th. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Hello, I'm Brett Black, 2579 Pleasant Crest Court. Nice work, Dan. Terrific family. So a couple questions. The safety meeting, was that an open or closed meeting? Was it invitation only?
It was invitation only.
And why was that?
Because we're discussing the plans that are considered not public record, and there are decisions that are made in that context that are supposed to be secure.
Okay, and how was it determined who, other than school officials, would be invited?
That came through my office.
And what was the criteria you used for selection?
People who have engaged in previous conversations with me, including
Okay.
yourself.
So parents, some parents were involved in it as well?
2 parents, you would have been the 3rd parent that was invited.
Okay, was I invited to it?
Yes, you were.
How did I receive correspondence?
Email.
I did not receive that. Okay, well, that was my main concern is who was invited and why.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah,
For that.
I can get you that correspondence.
No need.
Okay.
No need,
All
I
right.
believe. Next question was in regards to security, putting something in place sooner than later. And thank you out to everybody who was involved in the safety meeting, putting forth what looks like some incredible ideas. But I'm a little concerned at the time frame. July is a long ways away, and obviously chances of something like what happened in Parkland, happening in our school, very astronomical. However, if it does happen, huge problem. My concern is that currently there is no protection for our kids at the point of attack, and I think that needs to be taken care of immediately. My suggestion is, as mentioned there, armed SROs, school resource officers. They serve multiple functions, including providing security for our kids. These are licensed law enforcement officers, so this would not be an armed teacher or something like that for those who would object to that. Licking Valley, Heath, Licking Heights, several other schools have already taken action, and they've already approved SROs in their schools. And my question is why is it taking us so long to do this? Who do I need to address that question to?
Well, this is public comment.
Yeah.
We'll have an opportunity to comment at board commentary.
And that's at the end of the board meeting, is that right?
No, it's right.
right
It's
Follows after
next.
this.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. And that's all I had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So I've never been to one of these meetings before, so I just have a question. If I have questions, is that?
Certainly.
Yeah, you can post them there. Yeah.
I will tell you, as we mentioned with Mr. Black, we typically don't engage in the response back and forth during public comment, but we may well comment on it.
I'll just ask the questions. You don't need to respond.
Fair enough.
Chad Caldwell, 105 Blackstone Court. So it's regarding the safety meeting, and really more. I mean, it sounds like some great stuff. The task force is done with all the ideas. So the questions, I guess, for consideration, no response needed, but there was a lot of mention about cost being a major factor in some of those ideas, and I'm just wondering, or suggesting, I guess, maybe an impact analysis be done as well, along with the cost assessment, and then based on cost and impact and that combination. I don't know what the process is, but is there a process for prioritizing those items against other items that are in the budget that aren't safety related that might need to drop off? And then the last thing is, Brent was mentioning other districts that have, done things. Is there any team collaboration, from safety committee to, I'm sure there's other safety committees in other districts. Is there any kind of cross collaboration there just for idea generation or tactics or whatever that, might be pursued? That's all business oriented stuff that we do in the business world, so I don't know if that's relevant here or not, but that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
This was the documentation that folks.
Okay.
Next call. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll close the public comment and move to board discussion.
Would you like me to address a few of the questions that I know I can answer
Certainly. I think that'd be
immediately?
helpful.
That way people don't have to stay very long.
Jeff, I'll tell you what that
Yeah. Thought you might appreciate that.
We do.
So I'm going to work bottom up. First of all, the cross collaboration. In Licking County, there's kind of a unifying task force that brings all of the first responders in from around the county, and we meet. Typically, Sheriff Randy Thorpe organizes that through the Licking County ESC. All the districts are present with their local police force, and so we have that type of collaborative experience, but it's typically most of the first responders and the people that are in charge of emergency management for Licking County. Our task force in each location are pretty large, so hosting something that had everybody would probably be problematic, but it is something that we do collaborate on quite regularly. The impact analysis, absolutely. Cost, impact, that's something that we consider when the board makes when we present our priorities to the board, and then the board has their ability to make decisions based on those priorities. So yes, we will. And we will look at our aggregate budget because the school district, the way it operates, if you're buying one thing, you're not buying something else. So it's a give and take. And then, Brett, you had mentioned the different the municipalities that entered into agreements immediately with the SROs. In certain circumstances, and I know that was the case for Licking Valley and Lakewood, there was a deep conversation with the sheriff's office about response time, and response time factored in heavily. And so that was a topic of discussion in our meeting with the GPD about response time and if they're apples to oranges or apples to apples. So that's one topic of conversation that will continue in the safety committee meeting, I'm sure, in June. So just wanted to make you aware of that.
GPD's response time? Active shooter rifles.
Yeah, exactly.
What was it?
I don't recall the exact number. They gave a range, I believe, of 90 seconds to 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are usually concluded within a minute and a half to 2 minutes with multiple fatalities, so that would be the concern there.
Yeah. There were other comments made, but I just wanted to let you know some of that conversation did occur in the safety meeting. Okay? All right. No, I don't have anything else on my list around that topic.
So one of the things that I know the board intended to have some commentary around tonight involved the levy, but it may make sense if anyone else has commentary on the safety issue to do that first before we move to the levy. If anyone has a
I appreciate all the community members that are actively engaged in this and voicing their opinion. There's going to be a lot of folks that are going to come to the table with different kinds of ideas, right? And I think we've got the right process set up to kind of evaluate them as subgroups and again look at that cost-benefit analysis and which comes into play. And that cost piece of it kind of leads us into the levy conversation to some extent. But I know that irrespective of what cost of individual elements is, the safety of the students in the schools has always been our highest priority and will always continue to be within the context that we can. As we look at the long list of things, there's always more you could do, right? There's always risks and things like that need to be mitigated. And so I think we've got the right process in place. And, I like the idea of that, impact analysis and those cost trade-offs, right, to help us make the right decisions on which elements we can implement.
I think you're right. As I said at our last meeting, we have always taken great pains to make decisions based on evidence and based upon strong data that supports decisions we make, whether it's in the classroom or anywhere else. We do the same thing with security. It's an obligation that I know the administration takes extraordinarily seriously as their primary obligation, and as a board, we do as well. What I indicated at our meeting last month is that we would seek the advice and input from our safety committee, which is comprised of a number of professionals. We've engaged in that process. I can tell you I was at that meeting. There was, on the single issue of SROs, there was an absolute absence of clarity amongst the law enforcement personnel there about whether or not that was the right thing to do. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't make a decision to do that. But I would say that the evidence isn't there yet, that is the single most important thing to do in terms of enhancing safety in the schools. And we will do whatever the evidence indicates is the single most important thing to do to enhance safety in the schools. It's a process that takes a little time. We wish it was in place already. We wish it was in place. Facilities say the day after Parkland. We wish it was always in place. But we'll make decisions based upon where the evidence takes us. Cost is always a factor. Clearly, if we made a determination to put SROs in the schools, or if we made a determination to put metal detectors in the schools or something else, that is, as Mr. Brown indicated, the cost that we'll spend in one area and take out of another. We've done that before. We've made hard decisions before. We'll do it again. But I think this board will make a decision based upon the full, thoughtful recommendations of our safety committee and our first responders and law enforcement professionals, and we'll implement that thoughtfully. And so, as a parent with children in the school, like many of you, that doesn't give me the greatest comfort because we know, having seen the evidence in other schools, that there's some risk. I can tell you personally, if I had seen the evidence that putting first responders in each one of our 4 schools would absolutely assure that no children in this district would ever be shot and killed, I would have voted to do it right away. I haven't seen the evidence of that yet, but we're still considering it. So from my perspective, we're engaged in a very, very serious process. We already have a number of security measures in place that we've had in place for a number of years that we don't publicize. I wish that I could tell you that those, in the same way that having an SRO in the district, offer us absolute assurance that an event like Parkland or like Columbine could never occur here. But we all know that no such assurance is available. We'll continue to do everything that we can do to support our staff and administration, to involve law enforcement in what we do, to make certain that we're taking as many steps as we can to ensure security, some of which we'll publicize, others of which we haven't and won't. And we'll continue to consider what the next steps are. Anybody else? So thank you for your comments. They're appreciated. Everybody in this community, like in communities across the country, has a heartfelt sense that we want to do everything we can to protect our kids. There's nobody here or anywhere in this community that doesn't feel that way. And so we'll continue with it. So the next topic for discussion at the board tonight is the levy that's on the ballot for May 8th. Thank you to Mr. Francona and to your volunteers who have worked tirelessly to put out information to the community, to respond to questions to the community, to engage in conversations which are very important for this community and for our schools. We appreciate that. We know that it's thankless work. The patience and grace that you've exhibited in doing that certainly far beyond me. So I'm glad that you're doing it. But we do have a levy on the ballot on May 8th. And as Mr. Miller indicated, frankly, there's some impact in that in everything that we do, in how we staff the school, how we plan our budget, how we view everything that we do. Because our budget, which is about $29–30 million, is a fairly static budget, and we spend where we can spend, and we save where we can save, and make decisions about what we can do. So anything that we add requires something else that we don't pay for or don't sponsor. Any decline in funding, which would occur if the levy isn't passed, means we make cuts to our budget, to our spending, to our priorities, and pull back. The boards in this town have done that before, and so that's just the reality of school funding as we go. We'll offer my perspective on one issue with respect to the levy, and then open it up to the rest of the members. I'm not on social media, thankfully. But I hear about things. And one of the things that I hear about regularly is a view in some folks in the community that this board intends to, if the levy is passed, to undertake a wholesale renovation of our athletic stadium at the high school. That's not true. What we have done, and what we've always done, is to conduct open meetings and hear proposals and concepts and consider them over the course of numerous meetings before we vote and decide on things. In December, we asked the administration to present a proposal to us about upgrading some of our facilities, including athletic facilities, just as we do periodically throughout the year. What you may not know is that the administration has in place a continuous process where we're always evaluating what our needs are from a facilities perspective. We have a 20-year plan that's updated every year about where we need to enhance our current facilities, where we need to replace things. The average age of the buildings in this district are 35 years old. The newest building in this district is the intermediate school, and just last year we had to replace the roof on that 16-year-old building. So you know this because you all own homes. The older your home is, the more you're spending on things like heating and air conditioning, roofs, windows. We have the same issue here in all of our buildings. Our budget annually allows us to plan and prepare for replacing buses that are become obsolete, plan and prepare for replacing things like boilers and air conditioning units that become obsolete. We engage in a lot of preventative maintenance, but there's not enough money in the budget, and never has been, to undertake significant repairs or upgrades of our buildings. And there are a number of things that our 20-year plan would indicate are going to need to be repaired soon. There are some leaky roofs. There are some other issues. What this board said in December to the concept of an upgrade of the athletic stadium is that we looked at it in really a bifurcated manner, which is there are things that we feel we're responsible for, and there are things that we think might be on someone's wish list that would have to be financed through private donations or a combination of private donations and some district money. To be clear, there's been talk about installing artificial turf on that stadium, and as a traditionalist, I don't like artificial turf. I think every game should be played on grass. But the rationale behind artificial turf in that stadium is that you could then use it 7 days a week instead of once. The men's and women's soccer team, the field hockey team, the men's and women's lacrosse team, the marching band could all utilize that field every day of the week instead of finding alternatives either somewhere around the high school or working in the parking lot as the marching band does, or when the weather's bad, going over to Denison and practicing in the Mitchell Center. And so to me, there is some rationale for a future prospect of replacing artificial turf. This board doesn't intend to do that if this levy passes. That is not, I repeat, that is not our plan. That is not our intent. That's not what we've ever said we will do. We have said clearly that we would consider at a point in time, and frankly, it'll be future boards. You won't have my pretty face to look at, or maybe others, I don't know. It'll be future boards that will decide that. But we have said that should be a combination of private donations and some district money. What we do take seriously is our obligation to maintain health and safety in all of our facilities. So just like we wouldn't invite guests or students into our classrooms, to our theater, to our multi-purpose rooms, we won't invite someone to sit in the stands at our football stadium if we think it's unsafe. And we're getting to the point where that's a real consideration. So when students, staff, parents, and other visitors come to that facility to watch football, or the women's track team that we saw earlier today, or watch the marching band perform, or watch other activities, we have a duty and obligation to make sure that those facilities are safe and comfortable. Not deluxe, you won't see that from us, but safe and comfortable. And so, while I want to be absolutely clear that it is not our plan to install artificial turf in the football stadium, we'll leave that to future boards at a future time. It may be something that we will do sooner rather than later to improve or enhance or replace the stands in the stadium to ensure public safety. So there's no doubt about that. We have a number of other spending priorities in our facilities, 20-year plan that will require investment. As I said, we have some leaky roofs, we have some failing air conditioning. We have some furnishings that need to be repaired and replaced. But over the next 20 years, there's a lot to do. And that's what this is about. When this board put the levy on the ballot, we said that we thought it was necessary and the right vehicle to ensure the long-term financial health of this district, to continue doing what we're doing, hiring good teachers, hiring great staff, providing for our students, and also making sure that the facilities that we offer are safe, accessible, and comfortable. Not deluxe, but safe, accessible, and comfortable. And that's what we'll continue to do.
Just to put a few numbers to things, what is our annual maintenance budget? Like, what should we, or what do we spend, or what will we, ideally spend?
On it, go ahead.
On average?
We
You
spend.
should hear from the treasurer.
We spend about $1 million a year in our current budget on facilities. 30% of that, of course, is going away over the next 7 or 8 years. But besides that, but in reality, we do a 5-year capital plan like we do a 5-year forecast, which is taken from the 20-year plan, but only goes out 5 years. And our budgetary needs to meet the things that are in that 20-year plan on a regular basis, not counting catastrophic roofs or something like that, is about $1.5 million, roughly. 1.4 to 1.6 is what we really need to do what we need to do to our concrete and our floors and our air conditioning and heating and buses and technology and all that is what we need on an annual basis. And so the levy would allow us to do that. The plans that we have in the levy and how we're going to fund the capital will allow us to have a budget around $1.5 million each year to do all our routine maintenance, which should allow us to meet the needs that are in the 20-year plan each year.
The only thing I would add to that is that when we've had some catastrophic costs pop up, that defers our maintenance even further. And that puts other facilities at more of a risk for deterioration to the point where that's the catastrophic issue. We've mentioned the roof, we've mentioned the life safety system, the sprinkler system at the middle school, high school complex needs to be replaced. When that's $300,000 out of $1 million budget that you have to maintain your facilities, that's a large hit. And we've been encountering those, as Mr. Janisse said, our buildings are older. And so we're encountering more and more of those types of issues.
So we don't really have a big contingency. Like, when you do a home renovation, you have a 10% contingency for surprises that you find. So, but we don't.
Yeah, our contingency, we budget about $50,000 a year that out of that $1 million that we don't allocate to specific projects at the beginning of the year in case things come up that are obviously not major. We do maintain a cash balance in the account, which can handle, a lot of that is to handle timing. We do so much of our work over the summer at the beginning of the fiscal year because we do it when students aren't here because it's disruptive. And some of that cash balance allows us to spend the money and then have enough to do it so we get filled back up by the property taxes. We have a contingency for if something somewhat major happens, we can dig into it. Something that's $500,000, we can only hope it's covered by insurance. That it's something that happened that is we can claim on insurance that has caused it. Because no, we do not have the cash reserves to handle a $500,000 project like the roof, which we ended up partially by deferring maintenance and partially by tying it in with the energy project and doing lease purchase to pay. We're paying for that roof over, or at least part of it over 15 years because we had to do financing because we just didn't have the cash to do $550,000 all at once.
Thanks.
I've really enjoyed talking to a lot of community members recently and enjoyed going to some of the coffee chats that we've had with different segments of the community. And I'm enthusiastic that the community will continue to support the schools. We've got such a fantastic message. But I will say that the conversation is often very difficult, right? Because the initial reaction toward taxes is negative. People say, we don't want more taxes, right? And it's been 5 years since our last levy, right? And that's just long enough for people to kind of forget the levy cycle, right? And so there is a conversation that has to happen initially just about the levy cycle and the fact that, you know, the tax law in the state of Ohio does not allow our revenue from the majority of our revenue from property taxes to increase with inflation. And our costs do, you know. We've been able to hold down our salary costs to just 1.5% per year from a base salary perspective because of the way that we've hired teachers that are strong and capable younger teachers. But we had significant inflation in things like benefits, healthcare, right? Some years double-digit inflation. So although our revenue from property taxes for the most part has not increased, we've had significant increases in inflation, and we've had some real headwinds with the state funding formula, right? On a periodic basis, it seems like they take money away for transportation. They change their funding model so that communities with more wealth get less support. And I don't see that changing. You know, we know that the state will always come up with their own formulas, and the politics will change as it will. And so it's time. You know, it's been 5 years, and it's time for another levy. And so that conversation helps most people. They say, you know, I do understand the system right now. I do remember that it's been 5 years. Or a lot of people have just moved here in the last 5 years, and they weren't even aware of this. But then there's a conversation around the income tax versus property tax, right? And we've committed to reducing property taxes with the passage of this levy by around 5%. And people say, well, that 5% is not as much as the income tax will be. So this is not a net neutral tax thing. This is, again, an increase in revenue for the school district to meet our operating costs that increase with inflation. And I'm confident that an income tax is the right thing for our community. More property tax on top of the high property taxes that we already have is something we've talked about for the last year as not really being sustainable. And this method of balancing, you know, income tax for a small portion, for around 20% of our revenue, with the property tax, which is the traditional base, is the right one so that the entire community can come out and support it. It's the right one so we can continue to support business and economic development. But that, again, is a conversation, right? And people just look at it as like, another way you're going to take money from me, right? And this is not really necessarily an option of like, do I want tax or do I not want tax, right? Everybody would kind of like not like more tax, right? But there's significant implications of this levy to our regular operating budget, right? And we haven't even talked about what could possibly happen if it doesn't pass, but it's certain that an organization like a school district in Ohio needs to continue to raise tax dollars. And whether that be through an income tax or a property tax in the future, I don't even want to think about, because I think we'll get the support of this community, but I know it's going to take a lot more conversations. Thank you all for offering to come out and support, you know, coffee chats and talk to your neighbors and make phone calls and walk around the neighborhood and so forth. The levy committee is doing a great job, but we need the whole community to engage in this as well. It's great to see the signs out there, but I challenge everybody with a sign in their yard to talk to 2 other people, right? And have them talk to 2 other people, because it's a conversation that makes this happen. And to the extent that there are questions, there are great answers out there on the granvilleaces.org website. And the district itself is open to all questions, right? And we've been as open as we can with the best responses we can on what the real economics are, on why this is the right number, on why this is the right timing, on why this is the right method, and on what the potential future use of these dollars could be. You know, we have operating expenses to run our schools, and we have aging facilities. And this one levy, which will replace a couple of capital levies on the property tax side, can do both of that and put us on sustainable footing. So I've enjoyed the conversations, but they're hard. You know, a lot of our biggest supporters are folks with income, right, that see this as an additional tax. And I'm not going to say it's not an additional tax, because it's tax to support the inflationary growth of cost of the schools. So thanks for everybody in the community to help step up and communicate as much as we can about the great things that the district is doing, because there's never a question on, the quality of the education, right? There's a question on, are we being fiscally prudent, right? And I think if you look at the history of this board, right, and if you look at the cost of educating kids per year, if you look at the dollars per student year that we spend and compare that to any other district in Central Ohio or around the state that has the kind of comparable results that we do, well, first of all, there's not many others that have our results. But we're far less expensive for the results that we get. So I think it's a great story. I've really loved having these conversations, but I know that over the next couple 3 weeks, we need to have a lot more of them. So that's just my quick spin on what I've heard from our coffee chats and the levy conversations.
One thing, the vast majority of this levy is going to just maintain what we currently do. We're not even looking to add programming or add teachers or anything like that, right? This is just covering really most.
Yes, but there are some things from an enrollment standpoint that are in the budget that if we pop in a certain
Right.
grade level, then we'd be adding employees. Yeah, but
Right.
yes,
Yeah, right.
in general, it's
Right.
to maintain.
Well, that's like our contingency for the unknowns.
Right.
Like, for instance, like unknowns that remind me that the state did take away transportation money.
Yeah.
And how much did they take from us? Remind me?
They will, by the end of next year, they will have taken about $250,000 a year from us.
Right, which is, no
So $1
small-
million over a 5-year forecast.
Right, which is no small
Yeah.
loss,
Mhm.
so.
And those are the kind of things that you don't get these happy surprises.
No.
The capital cost, all of a sudden you found a bar of gold somewhere. No, the capital cost surprises are always, it's an old AC station, it's like a parking lot. It's a facility of some sort, it's a roof, right?
Mhm.
Those are the kind of surprises that we get, and we get more of them from the state as well.
Mhm.
Hmm.
One thing that I've also heard in the community is, what happens if it doesn't pass? What kinds of things would we cut? Is that something that we can?
Yeah.
address?
Well, so I think I'm going to address it from a process standpoint.
Okay.
So a reduction in force is the mechanism that a board has in order to reduce staff when there are fiscal situations facing the board that require downsizing. That is governed by two documents, 331917, which is Ohio Revised Code, and the collective bargaining agreement with the association. So the executive session tonight is part of that process that's in the collective bargaining agreement to continue down that conversation and that road around a reduction in force. I've been on the record, and I'll say it again, we have to plan for every scenario. We hope that we don't have to use it, but we have to plan accordingly. So you will hear tonight some conversation around a reduction in force that would occur if the levy were to be unsuccessful. And those decisions would be made relatively quickly so that we can give any employee losing their position the opportunity to gain employment someplace else. And, Mike can talk about the fiscal level, but, what we look at is a balanced approach, but also look at what we don't necessarily have to provide from a state service perspective, but something that's enjoyed by Granville residents because it's a program that you've added over time, and you've become accustomed to it and value it. So there are programmatic changes, there are transportation changes, there are decisions outside of the reduction in force that you've discussed in the past, like pay to play. All of those conversations will be relevant in the next month as a board. But the process has been initiated already.
When you talked about reduction in force, are you talking immediately? Or are you talking next school year? Or
So
and what's the process or the thought process going into why would you do it if you did it immediately?
would you like to answer some of that?
Any cuts we do would be in effect for the next school year. There were nothing for this school year we're in right now. This school year is almost over. There's not a lot we can do. The issue we have, we've heard some, well, you have cash, why do you need to make cuts? And the issue isn't really is the fact that we have cash. We have some cash, it's not a ton of cash, but we're spending more than we're taking in. And next school year, we're going to be spending more than we're taking in, probably in a range of $625,000, $650,000. If the levy fails in May, and we decide, well, let's just wait and see if we can pass one in November. At that point, we've lost any opportunity to make reductions for the 18-19 school year. We're already a third of the way through the school year by the time we have that vote and it's really difficult and really, really disruptive to make changes in the middle of the school year. And the problem becomes if we say, well, we'll wait till November and see if we can pass one then. If we fail again, now we're looking at May, and the amount we're going to be spending more than we're taking in for the 1920 school year is close to $1.3 million. And so now you're looking at a $600,000 to $650,000 cut. You're looking at a cut that's $1.3 million, essentially double the cut that we would have to make now, and that would be a lot more painful. And you also look at, if we get to May, we'll have also lost a whole year of ability to collect new taxes, which means that the ask in May is going to have to take into account that we'll have lost a whole year of revenue, and will probably have to be a higher, whether it's property tax, where, right now maybe we ask for 7 mills, by next May it may have to be 9 or 10, because we'll have lost a year of collections of revenue before our cash balances got so low from spending more than we're taking in. And that's why, nobody likes to cut, but I think from a standpoint of fiscal prudence, we need, if the levy fails in May, we really need to be in a position where we're going into next year projecting not to spend more money than we are taking in, to give us a little bit longer flexibility for addressing our needs.
To be clear, the spending cycle, we're at the point in the levy life cycle where we're spending more than we're taking in is natural to the levy cycle. We're not alone, it happens in every district. You always, when you pass a 5-year levy, you always take in more income in the first part of that levy cycle than you're spending, with the expectation that you're going to be putting some of it away to spend in the second half of the levy cycle where you're taking in less money than you're spending. So it's a normal cyclical process with the way levies fund school districts now.
The problem becomes, once you start spending more than you're taking in, it's like rolling a snowball down a hill. As it goes down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger each year. And the bigger, think about a snowball rolling down the hill, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to stop it from continuing to roll. And that's what you face by not addressing it while the snowball's still small.
One question that I keep answering, but I'd like Mike to speak to it, is the phase-in of an income tax versus a property tax. And so people are saying this is for 2019. It seems like there's an overlap. So can you talk about that? So I've been addressing that, but I think maybe your treasurer should.
Yeah, the problem, the difference with an income tax and a property tax is the way the income tax is paid, it comes in much slower than a property tax. The income tax we're projecting on a full year basis to generate $5.7 million. If we had asked for the same level of property tax, whatever it took to generate $5.7 million, in fiscal year 2019 with a property tax, we'd have taken in about 2.85 million, actually about 2.9 million of that 5.7. We get a little over 50% in the first half of the year. The way the income tax comes in, we're only going to get about $345,000 in fiscal year 19, again, as opposed to a property tax where we would have gotten $2.9 million. That's a big difference. And that's why, so you end up with some of the overlap. And honestly, most of that $345,000, the way that we have this structured, is really going to be diverted into our capital budget to to address the capital needs, because that's where our most immediate needs are, at least as we view them right now. That they can change through discussion. And so we actually do not get the full 100% collections of the income tax until the third fiscal year that we start getting money. The second year, we get about 85% of the revenue. And then we finally, in the third fiscal year, because of the collection pattern, is when we see the full amount of money. We have enough cash balance to handle that phase in right now. That's why, in my earlier presentations, I said if we don't pass this during 2018, then it's really no longer an option, because if the tax didn't start, if we didn't pass it until 19, where it starts on January 1st, 2020, by that point, our cash situation is precarious enough that we need to get more than $345,000 in the first year to avoid running out of cash in the middle of the year.
So I'm glad I've been answering accurately, but I've basically been saying we're going to get 6% of that revenue in the first year, 87% in the second year, and fully collected in the third. But I think that's an important message to send to the community, because they might be looking at the 5-year forecast and saying, well, they do have some cash, but again, the phase-in matters.
I think another sort of misconception is that this is not so urgent for some reason. People haven't really heard the clear message that, yes, this is going to immediately impact the services that we currently offer to our kids. I mean, we're talking about, in order to come to some kind of budget which will be sustainable through whatever potential future levy we would have, a reduction on the order of $600,000 a year, which is a number of positions, right? We will also look at all other kinds of spending and fees and other options that we have, but in an organization where 80% of our budget is staff and benefits, right? There's no way to get that kind of savings without significant changes in staffing, right? So, we are going to look as creatively as we can about ways to maintain the most programming possible, right? But in reality, we have on the order of what,
8 to 10
positions that will have to go away, right, in our current budget forecast. And you can't take that kind of staffing out of an organization without impacting student-teacher ratios. You can't take that many positions out without impacting programs that we have that are fantastic programs that offer enormous value to our students. And there's some things that the state of Ohio says are not mandatory to have, right? I can't imagine that Granville would think they're not extremely important and mandatory from our perspective, but in reality, those are the ones that go first, right? Because legally, we have to do something, right, to balance the budget, and those are the ones that can go. And I don't put like a threat list out there, but in reality, there are a number of programs that you can imagine that are not state mandated, ones that will be impacted, and those are ones that offer enormous value to our students, and it's going to be extremely painful if this levy doesn't pass. And I think we need to be really clear with the public if that's the status that we're in. This is not like, oh, this is an optional levy because we'd like to fix up our buildings. No, this is how we run our schools, right? And after a lot of long analysis, this is the way that we've seen is the right way to move forward. So,
Just there's also been some discussion about pay to play, but at the state level, they've been talking about legislation that would prohibit us from doing that, right?
We're laughing because the person who introduced that bill is
The person who
gone
was really doing that was kind of forced to resign
in the
from
General Assembly.
legislature, for inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
So we have really not heard anything about that since he has resigned
Okay.
from the state senate.
Yeah, just getting paid to play.
Yes.
But that doesn't narrow it down an awful lot.
Pay to play would fill a portion of the gap, but not nearly.
No, I know it doesn't, so I just wanted.
When we did these discussions in 2012, leading into the 2013 campaign, pay to play would generate, the way that we structured it was $90,000 of additional revenue. That might keep one position that we would not have to cut, but it's not, we can't
It's not a,
get there
yeah.
alone. And some have tried. I mean, you've heard stories from a neighbor that had $600 pay-to-play fees that was just down the road on 161. So you probably know who I'm talking about. But, you know, it's not possible to get there.
Right.
The one other thing that I, you know, because I tend to talk about the reduction in force from a kind of a procedural standpoint, but understand the cultural difficulty it is. When it creates anxiety within the school district, within the staff, the teachers feel it.
Sure.
And I want to recognize the fact that that's a very difficult process for the entire organization. And nobody loves to pay taxes. Nobody likes a reduction in force.
And, you know, we lived through that, right? And it was very difficult on our community, but we were at a time a few years ago when that needed to happen. And at the time, you know, it was one of the most painful things I ever voted for on the board was to do that, but it was the right sizing at the time, right? And I sure wish we could do that again as easily as we did before. And I'm not saying it was easy in any stretch of the imagination, but like we right-sized the organization, right? And we found a way to live within our means there. And this next cut won't be right-sizing in any way, right? And it will be culturally damaging as well as, you know, damaging to the education of the students, right? When the student-teacher ratio changes and so forth. That's not the direction we want to head.
Right. So impact student-teacher ratios, and in fact, as you indicated, programs that we can offer.
Yep.
Some of the newer programs perhaps that we've implemented.
Absolutely.
You know, you make a good point, a critical point. And, we didn't put the earned income tax levy on the ballot because it's a wish list for things we want to do to address at the schools. It's that time of the levy cycle where we have to pass a levy in order to fund our operations. We made the decision because we have some other levies that are coming off because there's some property taxes we can go with. The earned income tax levy can consolidate what we would get in a permanent improvement levy, can consolidate what we would receive in a property tax levy that pays for operations, for staff, for curriculum, for everything else that we do. And we're trying to consolidate it into the one earned income tax levy, which we believe will last far longer than the 5-year typical levy cycle. One of the things that we did do, though, is make it a 5-year levy so that the community could have a chance to evaluate it. If the community approves it, the community will have a chance to evaluate it. And in 5 years, the board will bring it back to the community for a vote. If it's successful and the community feels like it's the right way to fund going forward, the community can affirm that and vote to do it again. Adjustments could be made. Could be that it could be increased. It was more likely that it would be decreased by that period of time. Or it could be replaced with a typical property tax levy. So even though we believe in our forecast that the money raised will take us farther than 5 years, farther than the typical levy cycle, we want the community to have the opportunity to, again, approve or disapprove of what we do. But clearly there will be, there's no way to get around the fact that in Ohio, schools are funded with levies. And the state continues to pay less and less and demands more and more. The state has made no bones about the fact that it deems Granville, among other districts, to be a wealthy district. And under the funding plan in the state has made clear that wealthy districts are expected to pay more and the state will pay less. So the state now pays about 25% of what we spend on students. There are districts in the state that receive 85-90% of their funding from the state. It's just the way the legislature and the governor's office have designed the program. So it's really a pretty straightforward choice for us. It's not a matter of tax or no tax. It's a matter of what that tax is and how much it raises so that we can decide as a community, as a school community, as a board, what we can pay for going forward. And that's what we put out to the community. That's what these volunteers have tried to put the message out. It's a choice. And we think we have the best community going. We think the schools are an integral part of that. We know that our students are informed. We know that our parents are informed, and we want to put that information out so people can make an informed choice. Any other comments? Okay. I think that concludes
Yeah.
board discussion. So we'll move on to board reports.
But I don't believe
I don't believe
Dr.
we have
Corman
one.
has one.
So
Yeah.
So we'll skip over.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was late to the party.
To the-
so I didn't
yeah.
have one, Sorry.
Action agenda.
We'll move to the action. agenda.
So 10.01, board policy adoption.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
for being here.
So in our last meeting, I went through several policies that have been recommended by OSBA, including our emergency management safety plans, admission of homeless students, and a lot of tobacco use on school property changes from OSBA. None of them are dramatic changes in how we operate or conduct business. Very similar, more legal reference updates. The one thing that we did not put back on the agenda was the student wellness conversation that was an initial presentation in the last meeting. We're going to delay that conversation until May and get further clarity on that.
Any questions on the comments on the board policies? So this is the approval for these policies, the implementation, adaptation.
Yes, correct.
Take a look.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Dr. Corman,
Aye.
Ms. Deeds,
Aye.
Mr. Wolf,
Aye.
Mr. Janice.
Aye.
Okay, item 10.02 is the approval of the Summer Reading Institute expenditure.
So moved.
Second.
So as you know, as a board, anything over $25,000, we come back for approval. We have, in the past 7 years, really taken the approach to professional development that one, teachers talking to teachers is the best professional development, but two, we try and bring professional development in-house as opposed to sending people out to sit and gets. One of the ones that we have supported in the past for a sit and get is kind of a week-long institute from Teachers College, and it's all around literacy instruction. Some of the best professional development that's out there related to literacy. Mr. Morris, Ms. Burris partnered with Mr. Bernath and talked with the elementary and intermediate staff, and what we're going to do is bring the Teachers College trainers to Granville in August. It is an investment, but it's one of those investments that I think is absolutely critical because it's about a foundational skill. You know, if kids can't read, that's catastrophic for them in the long run. And so,
And I do want to add that the plan for all of this money is it's going to be paid for out of federal funds.
correct.
It is not coming out of our operating budget. It will come out of Title IIA funds, which are designed for professional development for our staff. And that is we should be, unless there's a radical change next fiscal year in how much federal funds that we get from the state, we will get enough federal funds to cover the full cost of this.
He stole my punchline. But yes, what he said. So we're very excited about this opportunity. Ryan and Travis, do you want to add anything?
The only thing I would add is we're excited to bring them, and we need board approval to start that process. So we're excited about maybe potentially what tomorrow holds to start that conversation.
I think this is really a critical time to do this. We weren't really ready for it a year ago, 2 years ago. I think now in both buildings we have lots of consistency with the reading and writing workshop approach. We have two very strong instructional coaches who are going to follow up with this PD and are chomping at the bit to really plan it and follow up with our teachers. And I think right now, we're kind of at reading workshop 1.0. This is going to take us to 2.0, maybe 3.0. It'll really take us to that next step.
Excellent.
Yeah. I'd like to point out, not just is it a big investment of funds, which are fortunately supported by some of the federal funds we receive, but it's also a big investment of time. You know, and I really like the fact that we've restructured our professional development so that we can consider significant endeavors like this. I mean, this is a full week-long initiative, the great outside training resources that we can bring in, but also a great commitment from our staff, right, to be able to be here for that full week before classes start and engage in that.
And to that point, many of the staff, well, all of the staff that are participating in the first couple of days, that is not necessarily paid. You know, they have the ability to get credit for, you know, that time from a professional development standpoint, but they are giving up part of their summer time to participate in this. So I think that speaks to the professionalism of our staff.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, I mean, and it's a lot for a teacher to give up some of their summer, right? But, you know, that really does speak to the professionalism of wanting to, you know, reinvest in themselves as professionals and in our kids with this kind of training. So thanks for bringing that up too. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions?
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Thank you. Next is the consent agenda, but I believe that we have,
Before we,
yeah,
go ahead.
a tweak.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do need to adjust the agenda on the consent agenda, specifically with 11.01A, the adoption of minutes. In the previous meeting, since Mr. Wolf was added to the board after the previous meeting began, we probably need to move that back up into the action agenda.
Yeah, we'll separate that out.
I think we need to
So-
separate the two special, we can
Yeah.
leave the last regular meeting, but the two special meetings. So I think we need to do
Good
a
point.
motion first to amend the agenda, then a motion for the adoption.
I'll make a motion to move the acceptance of the minutes for our two special meetings outside of the consent agenda as a separate item now. Is that-
Second.
Take the roll.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Okay, so now that's back up in the
Action agenda.
action agenda, and now we need a motion to
So
approve
moved.
those minutes.
Amy, and then I'll second that.
Any discussion? Take the roll.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Abstain.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Now we can move into the...
Yeah, consent agenda, so 11.01A through 8.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we always recognize the donations and acceptance of gifts. We appreciate our giving community. We have a couple of tweaks to the percentages of the coaching supplementals, so we adjusted that from last meeting, and we're reapproving those. And then I'd like to, recognize that, Cindy Schaefer is resigning from her Fine Arts Department Chair position, FCCLA and Key Club, and that's a byproduct of her earlier resignation from her teaching position. So with appreciation of service. The rest are standard items.
Questions? Please take the roll.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Thank you.
The end of the consent agenda, to the finance agenda.
Okay. First is the monthly financial report for March.
So moved?
Second?
The report is attached. As we move into the last quarter of our fiscal year, both revenues and expenditures as a whole remain very close to estimate. That's a good thing. Both are running slightly above estimate, well under 1% above estimate, so there's no material change to our financial position from where it has been. The couple things that I want to point out are on the last 2 pages that are added into the report. One is the property tax settlement, and this is actually going to make the 5-year forecast look a little bit weird when we do the 5-year forecast next month. What has happened is because of the federal tax law changes that take effect in 2018 with the restricted deductibility of state and local property income taxes. We have seen evidence, we have seen it here, we have seen it in a number of places around the state that I work with, where people have paid their entire property tax bill for 2018 prior to January 1st of 2018 in order to take advantage of federal deductibility. What this means is we're not getting more money, but we are getting the money faster. And so money that we were not anticipating showing up until July or August as part of the second half settlement, we have gotten as part of the first half. And that amount of money was close to $800,000 that we received. And again, it's money that's going to show up this year, will not be there next year. It's having no impact on the bottom line 5-year forecast, but it is impacting just when cash is flowing up. And where you can see that is if you look at the small top graphic, and this compares the first half's real property collections last year and this year, you can see in class 1, which is residential and agricultural property, we had $7.8 million last year and are getting $8.5 million this year. So there's a $700,000 increase. Nothing has happened to drive a $700,000 increase. We have not had a rash of new construction. We did not pass a new levy. It's just that people are paying early. And where you see that is in the second of the tables, and you can see our current collection rates have been running between 98.5% and 99%, meaning that almost everything that people are being billed are paying. But the problem was we had about $800,000 more cash, or $600,000, in that case, $600,000 more cash than our collection rate would justify. And even if you made the collection rate, say, okay, everybody paid their taxes, and 100%, we still had $400,000 to $500,000 more than the rates would indicate we should have. I was making the wild assumption that people are not decided to pay us more than was on their bill, that they are not paying us money that they aren't being billed for. So, and you see what happens, normally we get about 53% of our money in the first half of the year, and to balance out our residential, that percentage went up over 56%. So again, that is from the early paying. We also saw some evidence of that in our business property payments. My guess is that's probably in the small businesses where everything passes through, but it's still the business that pays it. And so we probably saw people doing the same thing as paying their full taxes in the first half of the year. And there you see, we again normally get a little under 53% of the money the first half of this year. We again, to make our collection rate, assuming that's correct, it had to be 55%. And again, next tax year, we're expecting that to go back to normal, that this is a one-time thing. So again, it's going to make the 5-year forecast, when we do it next month, it's going to look a little weird, is it's going to make this year look better and next year look worse. In reality, it's barely changed from where it was in October. The second piece I want to point out, this was a request from Mr. Janice, and this is to take a look at the substance abuse testing that we began this year, looking at whether the parking fees are covering the cost of the testing. And you can see that when you look at the revenue we've taken in parking fees, a little over $14,000. Our expenditures to date, as of early last week, were about $6,800. We have about $7,500 in cash. We still have a couple more tests that we have money reserved for between now and the end of the year. And there is some high school programming. You saw the Friday Night Lights program that the high school has done, which are drug-free activities. There was another one around prom last weekend that is not reflected in here yet. And I believe at least I think maybe one more coming up later in the year. But we do anticipate the parking fees covering all of the costs associated with both the substance abuse testing and the educational programming and alternate activities to go around the overall substance abuse changes.
Thank you for that.
Great.
Questions on the financial statement? If you can, Mike, pull it off so that we collect $800,000 more next year. But we understand that that's a one-time only event. That sort of was the confluence of what happened when the federal government tax reform was passed last year and limited the deductibility of state and local taxes.
Right.
No questions? Take a roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Okay. 12.02 is a resolution requesting assistance from, legal assistance funds from OSBA.
So moved. Second?
Thank you. This is in relation to the lawsuit that was brought over Mr. Wolf's appointment that we are facing. The open meetings laws, which again, we believe we have followed to the letter, but we are being challenged legally. The School Boards Association is very interested in getting clarity from the courts in this case, and they have offered to help us pay for the legal costs associated with the lawsuit that we are facing right now. Part of the process for getting it is for the board to pass a resolution allowing me to apply to the legal assistance fund, and that's what this is allowing me to go ahead and ask them for assistance.
And you every single year you approve a $250 payment to this fund through another action item, but so this is available to us through OSBA.
Great.
Questions?
I do not know. I do not know how much they. I know that they will not give us 100%, but I don't. So I don't know how much they will. There's a committee. They have a committee that will decide how much that they will supply us with. That they will let us know once we file the application.
So, and by way of explanation, these are legal fees that we're incurring as a result of being dragged into a lawsuit, not voluntarily.
Correct. That is correct.
Incurring legal fees, and there's limited or no insurance coverage available for those
Right,
legal fees.
because it's a non-fiduciary issue. That it is not covered by the district's liability insurance.
And I'm grateful for OSBA's guidance through this entire process and making sure we steered the correct way through it and so forth. And I feel confident that their initial guidance as well as their support in this matter will be great.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Thank you. Final resolution is 12.03, which is a then and now resolution to cover the cost of an appraisal that we pay for as part of a ongoing property tax case.
So moved?
Second.
Right.
Okay, a then and now is basically what happened was, with this ongoing case, this is the old Dow facility, down in 16, it's now owned by Springfield Spartans. We've had a series of challenges to the value. Our attorneys who represent us in these cases recommended that we go ahead and pay for an appraisal of our own because there was a feeling the appraisal that was being used by the company was not a very good appraisal. And because there was a lot of money involved here as far as the valuation and the potential taxes, We went ahead and did the appraisal. We're doing this because I thought we'd be paying this through the law firm as part of what we already did, but the bill came directly from the appraiser. And because it was more than $3,000 and the appraisal was already done, I need to bring it to you to approve us to pay the appraiser for the work that he has done on the property.
Questions?
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Entertain a motion for a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
This is to consider the employment of public employees or officials.
Ms. Dees?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Mr. Janice, you may want to formally invite the union leadership.
Yes. I would like to formally extend the invitation to the representatives from TEA into our executive session. We'll do that upstairs. There will be no further action, public action this evening. Thank you all for coming.